Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Well, every time I think I put fraud and scams too much on the calendar, we get a turnout like this. This is amazing. You can never hear this information too many times. Just this morning, two different people came to me telling me about cyber scams, that they were at various degrees of, I say falling for, but very, very believable things. People reaching out to them and being at risk of jeopardizing their information. So, very timely presentation. I'm going to turn this over to Mark Annati. You may recognize Mark as a member here. He joins us for some exercise classes and also occasionally seen behind a keyboard singing. But today he's going to talk about fraud, and I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Ooh, I have a big carrying voice, so I'm going to be careful with this. And this is an interactive session, so if you have a question, feel free to just throw up your hand. I'll wind up repeating it so that people can hear what you've asked. I've already had a few questions since I've walked in. But again, my name is Mark Annati. I'm a longtime resident of Walpole, almost 30 years now. My wife is a townie over here. That's Mary. You may know. I know quite a few of you here in the audience, so I do feel comfortable here being able to chat with you a bit about an important subject that's super important to me. And I'll share that you're the population that's the biggest target of all of these scams and these frauds that are going on. So hopefully I can save at least one of you from getting scammed. That's my goal, at least one of you, to prevent you from getting frauded. So let's dive in. I had a couple of slides about who I am, but feel free to see me afterwards. And everything in this presentation, I'm going to throw a lot of information at you. And I know you're going to be overloaded because things are going to be coming in and other things are going to be dumped on the floor as I'm sharing new ideas with you. But don't worry. I have some checklists that I'll provide you. They're available via my website, which is free. I don't track anything. You can download these PDFs that have checklists of things that I'm going to be talking about today, so that if you're not a techie, that's okay. You can take these checklists and you can give them to someone who can then help you with your technology. But let's dive in, because I have a little bit of an order of things that we're going to go through. So, and by the way, what I did share here is what we're going to learn today, which is awareness, discernment, protection, and action. And when you leave here, I'm hoping that you're going to have a set of behaviors that will help you not get frauded. Look, the scams that are out there are numerous. There's no way you could know all of the scams and the methods that they're going to try and get to you. And when I say they, it's mostly organized crime that's doing this. And it's not the typical kid in the basement, though that is a possibility. So the directions of attack are many. It's really a matter of how you shore up your own state of security. And we'll talk more about that. So let's dive in. So what are the top reasons why we can easily become a victim of fraud? Well, you know, we like trusting people, right? That's definitely a way that we can be frauded. So let's dive into some statistics first. This is according to the Federal Bureau of Investigations, their Internet Crime Report 2023. It came out a little while ago. And here are just some stats for you. They also do an elder fraud report, so I've got the stats on the right there. And these are only the complaints that got registered with the FBI. That means that someone felt the need and the desire to help add to the information that's out there. Many people, including probably many people in this room, may have been frauded and never reported it. So this is really the tip of the iceberg. And though this is going to represent billions of dollars in loss, there's probably a tremendous, maybe 10 plus times that, because it's not reported to the FBI. So here's just some stats. It continues to increase. The average dollar lost is $33,000. I've spoken with several FBI agents, one of which who shared with me over the many years that he had been doing this kind of work, investigating fraud. It was extremely rare that they were able to prosecute anyone successfully because of it. So it is a crime that often goes unseen as to who the perpetrator is, and the sufferer, which is us, wind up having to deal with all of the financial burden and the mental burden. And one of the things I want to help you get away from today is the mental burden that this brings about. There's a lot of thought process that you put into not getting frauded. And that's a lot of energy, it's a lot of worry, it's a lot of anxiety. So hopefully when you leave here today, some of that anxiety will go down. I am going to give you some stats that will cause anxiety, but I'm also going to give you some tools that will hopefully reduce that anxiety overall. What I want to emphasize here is that the problem is real. It's resulting in billions of dollars of loss. Here's just a chart that goes from 2019 to 2023, and we go from 2019, 3.5 billion in losses to 12.5 billion in losses. And again, these are only the reported losses. This is not the stuff where someone was frauded into going to their local Walmart, picking up game cards, and then calling back the perpetrator and giving them the codes on the cards so that the perpetrator could then cash those cards and launder that money. And I'll talk about a few scams along the way here. The top 5 crime comparison, these are all based on the years. If you can see there, 2019 through 2023 being at the top. The tech support scam still seems to be one of the most popular scams. Let me just take a little side note on that one. Has anybody ever had on their computer a little pop-up message that said their computer was infected and to call a number? Wow, look at that. Okay, well, you're at the top of the statistic list here. Hopefully, you didn't make the call. Probably many of you did, and I don't blame you because it's very convincing. Happened to me once. I got the pop-up on my computer, and I was like, really? Oh, and it happened because I was doing a Google search, and I clicked on one of the results, and it was a domain. That's called a domain name or a search result that was really frauded by crimesters, right? They put it up there at the top of your search list or the results, and then you click on it, and then you get the pop-up. And the pop-up says to call a number. So this particular scam, by the way, which is very popular, here's what happens. Your computer's infected. Call the number. You call the number, and the person who answers the call represents themselves as being Microsoft, usually, maybe Apple support, whatever the scam was that came up on your computer, but they're going to pretend to be an official entity. They're not, right? And then they're going to convince you to allow them to access your computer. And you're going to do that because it sounds so convincing that you're infected and you need help right away. Urgency is one of the tactics that scammers use. They want you to act quickly without a lot of thought. So they connect to your computer now, right? So I'm the victim. Here's the scammer, connects to my computer. I'm on the phone with them. And somehow, some way, they want to help me. And while I'm looking at my screen, their connection to my computer has a back-end capability that I can't see, and they're manipulating things in the back end. They're installing malware, maybe they're going to access accounts, they're going to do a number of things. And so, long story short, is they eventually get you to bring up your bank accounts, to log in, to do things like that. And they will take control, and they will either extort you, they'll trick you into transferring funds into another bank account, they'll fool you into thinking that they over-refunded you money and you now need to give them back money. So there's a lot of techniques that happen with this tech support scam. It could even result in your entire computer being locked with malware or cryptoware where everything is locked and you can't get to anything. So it's a real drag. Has anybody been a victim of this? I know you've got the pop-ups, but and actually don't feel obligated to raise your hand, because I think that's one of the things that causes us a challenge here, is that people are embarrassed. And it's okay. It's okay. I'm just letting you know. It's okay. We're all embarrassed when we get tricked into something. So the biggest catch here, I think, was Marianne, was it? Yeah, who was asking me about phishing. Am I going to talk about phishing? Phishing, which with a PH, is really all about sort of throwing that rod and bait out there and seeing who's going to get hooked. I started doing these presentations because back in January, my father, who is now 93 and has his wits about him, sharp guy, who uses an iPhone, wound up in a rehabilitation facility, and his iPhone got stolen. Now, I had been giving him advice over the years, but I didn't manage any of his technology. He did it all himself. Awesome. But when his iPhone got stolen, they wound up logging into his iPhone, so they knew his code somehow, some way that was planned. And by the way, this happened when he got transferred from the hospital to the rehabilitation facility. When he showed up there, his phone did not. So his phone went missing. And immediately, unbeknownst to me, because he's in South Florida, unbeknownst to me, his accounts are starting to get hacked. He's got all his financial information in there. He's got financial apps. They start going in to set up bank transfers, to hook up Apple Pay, to do all of these things. I didn't know any of this at the time. But what I did know is that my father was in trouble, so I flew down to Florida to help him. And not only did I help him with his medical situation, but I helped him with his iPhone and getting a recovery of all his accounts, which was a whole long story, and I may apply some of those stories along the way here. I also protected him against future hacks. But there were a lot of lessons that we learned along the way here. Phishing is a big one. The other day he called me, and he said, "Mark, I'm getting these calls where they're saying they're from Medicare, and then they want to confirm my zip code so that they know they're calling the right party." And so he enters his zip code, and then they hang up. So that happened to him twice in a row. Anybody get a call like that, where they give you a call and yeah? Ah. All right. So I'm going to repeat some of these things that come up because otherwise people won't be able to hear. But anyways, Medicare fraud, a call comes in. He was entering his zip code because that's what he was being prompted to do. And he asked me why that happens, right? And most people wouldn't know why that happens. But there's a couple of reasons why he got 2 calls 2 days in a row where he had to enter his zip code. One is he answered the phone. That's number one. And if you're answering calls these days, it's a tough position to be in because you never know who's on the other end of that call. One of my biggest proponents here, and you're going to see coming up, is to ignore anything unexpected. Now, I totally get that you're going to have doctor's appointments, you're going to have transportation appointments, you're going to have things where the incoming call, you're not going to know if it's related to a topic that you're currently dealing with, right, or an activity. And I get that. So you have to be very cautious if you're readily answering the phone. And my dad uses transportation, public transportation services, and they may call him from an unrecognized number. Unfortunately, he answers the call. So it's really a matter of how is he screening to make sure that they're the right people to be calling him, and he should be engaging. But one of the things is just answering the call, no, because that puts you on a list of a person who does answer your call. The second is that he gave up information willingly. He responded to a request. And that is another tick against him as being susceptible to fraud. And fraudsters use these automatic dialers to create lists of potential phone numbers and people that are more susceptible than others. Again, we're at the tip of the iceberg here. So here's my top 11 reasons why we are vulnerable. First, we lack awareness or knowledge. Like, he didn't know why they were calling him. He thought it was legitimate and put his number in there. Many of you are going to behave the same way. So am I. We're all susceptible to this. Social engineering. Fraudsters, they use fear, greed, and sympathy to gain your attention and to motivate you to action. There are psychological vulnerabilities that we have. We have biases that are built into our societal upbringing, our where we are in life. Those are psychological vulnerabilities that get us into trouble. Impersonation and identity theft. These are fraudsters who actually take our data and use it against us. Maybe they create medical claims or take out a loan or a credit card. I had a friend who called me the other day who had a credit card taken out in his name that he didn't do himself, and I had to give him instruction on how to deal with that. And then there are just some really sophisticated scams that gain your trust, and then in that, it becomes more of a confidence game. What was that movie with The Sting? Remember The Sting? Anybody remember that movie? Right? It was all about building confidence, right? It's the same old stuff. It's just in the electronic age these days. Lack of security measures. That means that you don't have the appropriate security measures on your phone or your computer. Maybe you don't have a good, strong password, or you're not using face recognition for those sensitive financial apps. Human error is a big one. That means you made a mistake or someone else made a mistake. I have at home 5 letters that I've received within the last 2 years that say that my data's been compromised, and here's a service that you can contact to track if you're going to be further compromised. Anybody receive a letter like that? Yeah, many of you, right? And most of those letters that come from whoever that organization is, whether it be healthcare or government or private industry, they usually blame someone else. They say, it wasn't us, it was our third-party processor that got compromised. I mean, I had a CPAP company that had to send me a letter because my personal information got compromised, including my social security number. And I just take it for granted these days that my confidential information is already out there on something called the dark web. And that's the big part of the web that none of us see. It's really, we see the tip of the iceberg, which is all the legitimate stuff, but there's a whole underlying dark web that's happening there. And a lot of this information is just up for sale. So that means it's more important for you to protect your credit and your health care and other accounts that are super important. The complexity of our modern life. Look, these days, everything's done online. It's very difficult to call and get someone, right? Everybody's pointing you to go to some website somewhere to register and then do further things, get reports via email, that kind of stuff. It's just going to get more and more complex like this. Overconfidence. Sometimes you're like, nah, they can't touch me, they can't hurt me, nothing's going to happen. You know, I think I don't have that attitude, and I know this stuff. So I know that there can be things that are bad that can happen. There are financial incentives. I got a call on my voicemail yesterday. It was, Spectrum has changed your billing. This refund is not going to happen. I forget exactly what it was because I don't pay a lot of attention to them, but it was a voicemail that got me curious, right? They want to catch your curiosity. Oh, I'm getting a refund? Or, oh, I didn't pay for that. I'm going to call that right away and say, I didn't pay for that, right? Anybody get a U.S. Post Office text that your package, they're trying to deliver it, but they need more information, right? These are all things to really get you interested, pique your curiosity, right? And then the technological sophistication of everything as well. So some of the common scams that are targeting us, I've already mentioned a few, but let's just dive in here. Here's my top 16. The personal data breach and identity theft, those are those letters that you get that say your information's been compromised. The phishing emails and business email compromise. I had one time in a prior business where a client received an email supposedly from the business I was working for that said, hey, your payment, instead of sending it here, send it over here, to actually an address in New Jersey, which was like, how can that be? But the client sent a very large check via FedEx to the address in New Jersey, and then called my company to the account rep and said, hey, I sent that check. And my account rep's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And they were able to catch it in time. So I do have quite a few successes in my head as to things that got thwarted. And I also am aware of just people who have gotten frauded significantly of their life savings, which is a real stinker. Medicare, health insurance, and government impersonation scams. We just had an example of that back there. You get a call from someone from the government. When was the last time the government called you on anything? Right? You're usually going to get something via U.S. postal mail when it concerns the government, right? And you should always check the phone number before you call it. Make sure you go to the official website to verify that you're actually calling the right number. And I see a bunch of you shaking your heads like, yeah, I know that, but some of you don't. So I'm going to cover everything here. Investment in real estate fraud is really a big one. Look, you're probably mostly, or if not all, retired. You're watching your pennies. Things are attractive when you can gain a little money here or there, you know, especially lotteries or real estate opportunities or things like that, right? Those are the things that the fraudsters want you to have interest in so that they can hook you and reel you in. The tech support scams we just talked about. Extortion, stalking, and threats of violence. This is definitely real. Happens to a lot of youth where they are extorted. Maybe they sent an indecent picture to someone, and now that's being used to extort them. So we're not going to talk a lot about the youth today, but the youth have their own set of problems that they're dealing with from a cybersecurity perspective. Romance and confidence scams. My sister, one of my sisters, was in a relationship. And now I discovered this as I was talking with her one time. She said, oh, I met this guy. He lives in the Netherlands, and he's got a dog, and his son's away, and I've been talking with him for several weeks. So she had this going on, this conversation going on several weeks. Never spoke with him live. Was always on chat. And developed this relationship over time. And by the time she told me about it, it was about 3 weeks into it. And the spidey sense goes up. I'm like, oh, this sounds like a scam. But I didn't want to say that to her because I don't want to dash her hopes. It could be legitimate, right? So I was very sensitive to it, and we talked it through. And then I said, well, if he asks you for money, that's a big red flag. The next day, he asked her for some money so that he could travel to the United States and visit her. And then she cut it off. But look, we all want companionship. We all want to be able to feel that, right? It's very challenging when on the other end of it is some guy in India who's pretending to be a woman, you know, that's you've been conversing with for 3 weeks, or someone in Russia who's pretending to be that guy of your dreams, right? It's very prevalent these days. And some of these scammers, though many of them are in it for the money and it's organized crime, some of these scammers are actually, they have their papers being withheld. And they actually have to develop these relationships as part of getting their paperwork back so that they can actually move on. They get attracted into false opportunities, job opportunities, and then they find out without their paperwork that they now need to do, it's basically slave labor is what happens in some of these situations. Not all the cases, but I just want you to know that there's many nuances to the crime that's taking place out there. Even the people who are conducting the crime are victims of crime themselves. No empathy for the scammers, by the way. I'm just giving you the perspective. QR code scanning. These days you go into restaurants, places, maybe you're at a festival and they've got a QR code on a tea stand or something, right? And you go to scan it because you want to get more information. These are very dangerous. I'm just going to recommend, unless you absolutely need to scan the QR code. By the way, on most modern phones, you scan one of these QR codes, which I'm going to have at the end of my presentation, by the way. I'll have one of those, and that's okay to scan. But you'll scan the code, and it'll lead you to a fraud website where they'll collect more information to get you. So you got to be really careful with the QR code. Scammers go into restaurants, replace menus. They'll outpaste their own QR code on top of other QR codes. So just be aware of that. Again, the top list here, credit card and check fraud, which is why I always talk about monitoring your credits and your checks and your accounts, making sure that if you ever make a purchase, you get some sort of confirmation back that you made that purchase. So you'll know that if there's a fraudulent attempt, you'll get that. That happened to me 2 weeks ago. I had a credit card that was frauded against an account that I have, and I immediately knew because I got the notification. And then I had to call the company and cancel the card. And look, I'm interested in knowing how it was frauded. Where did that happen? How did they know the amount of my bank account that they attempted to withdraw on the debit card, the exact amount of my account? How did they know that, right? That means that somehow they had access to that information. So when I called the company, it was a trading company, by the way. I called the company to report the fraud, and they're immediately, yeah, we're going to cancel your card and send you another one. Nobody cares to do any kind of investigation. Like, that is a thing of the past. So I'm just going to set your expectations. Don't expect a lot. You'll get a new card in the mail, but you won't know how it got frauded, where it got frauded, and why. And even after I knew what the source was, what the attempted account being purchased was, I reached out to their fraud department to say, can you give me more information? And they just gave me a boilerplate response, because they're not going to want to let you know that they somehow are part of that fraud operation, or they're a victim themselves and have weakness in their security. Look, everybody's not saying stuff. That's what's happening out there. So we need to be very vigilant on protecting ourselves. So yes. What do I think of LifeLock and these other services that are out there? So I'm not going to be promoting a single service. And when you get these letters from the credit card, whoever the company was that your data was breached, they usually give you a service, and they say, go to this website, log in with this code, and then they'll track your information and notify you if there's anything that's leaked on the dark web, or if there's a change or anything. First off, I recommend you do that. The services that I've used that do that, and I have used LifeLock in the past, years ago, they are good to keep you aware of what your credit and other activities are. But these days, most of this information is already on the dark web. It's just a matter of making sure you shore yourself up. So look, the question was, what do I think about LifeLock? I think you should have a service that is watching and protecting you. I cannot promote LifeLock because it's been a long time. I don't know. I haven't done any ratings, so it's very difficult for me to endorse a single tool or service. But I do recommend that you have a service that's keeping an eye on things. And yes. Oh, I'm so happy that you brought that up, because out of those several letters that I have waiting for me, I've only acted on a couple of them. And the reason is exactly for what you're saying, is they're sending you to a website where you actually have to enter your social security number and contact information, right? So even that is suspicious. So I'm sort of the ultimate paranoid kind of guy, and I'm trying not to make you super paranoid, but I'm trying to make you a bit more protective. So if you had a LifeLock or some other service that's already doing that, then you're pretty well covered already. They are obligated by law to provide you credit protection services. That's what it is. And you can protect yourself by going to the top 3 credit providers and actually putting a freeze on your credit. And I have some information coming up here on that. And by the way, I have a lot of detailed information that's following up on slides here that I'm probably going to fly through because I'm telling you quite a bit of it now. And again, I will make this presentation available to you. If you would like to get it afterwards, just see my wife, Mary, and she will take down your contact information and I can send that to you via email. I also have on my website, I've got free guides that give you all of this information. You can download it. It's a PDF. You can bring it to your favorite tech person and say, can you make sure I'm covered with all of these things? And they will help you out with that. All right. The lottery sweepstakes and inheritance scams. You won something, but now you need to send money to secure the taxes, to pay those in advance. It smells fishy, right? Interestingly, I had an elder friend of mine who provided me, he said, look at this letter. And it was an official lawyer-looking letter that talked about an inheritance that they were reaching out to this person to you look like the long-lost heir for this. And it was very officially written, but immediately, as soon as I read the first sentence, I was like, oh, this was a scam, which I saw him have a bit of a frowny face because he was like, oh, it's not real? Oh. Phone SIM hack. So on our cell phones, we have a little chip. Some of them are not necessarily physical chips, but they can be hacked. They can be swapped, cloned, jacked. I just caution you, keep an eye on your phone. Be very careful who you let work on it. And that you only go through official sources. For example, you may be tempted if you have an iPhone and you broke the bevel to go to your local wherever it is to get it repaired. I recommend you go to the Apple store, pay the extra dollars, and make sure that you're covered by the entity that produced the phone. Otherwise, you can have something like this where they tap into your SIM and now they're able to see everything at the root level of your phone. That means if you get a text with a multi-factor authentication code, that can be seen. Any passwords you enter can be seen. So it's just stuff like that you just got to be super careful of. The grandparent scam. Anybody here get a call from supposedly their grandkid? Yeah?
Well, my brother did, and they said that their grandson was in a prison in Canada, and she had
needed money.
The cards because they wanted her to go and get a $2,000, something like that.
Game cards. Yeah.
She did go there, but thank God the Walmart person said, "Can I ask you a question? What are you using this for?" My mother answered her, and she said, "No, I'm not letting you do it." She said, "I want you to go right over their phone next to the police department." And she would not tell her. So.
I'm going to summarize what you just shared. What's your name?
Yeah, Linda.
Linda. Hi, Linda. Thank you so much for that. So Linda provided some really insightful information as to these scams, right? What they do is they call the person, whoever you may be, and say, oh, so-and-so, your grandson or whatever, is in a prison or it needs to be, is stuck in a situation traveling, needs some money sent to them right away. Here's how to do it. Go to Walmart, pick up some game cards, and send us the codes for the game cards. And you're like, what does game cards have to do with it, right? Like, well, it's a way of laundering money. The game cards actually have codes on the back, and you have to scratch a little section to get the actual authentication code for it. And once they have those codes, they can take that money and then they can launder it further, usually buying Bitcoin and just obfuscating wherever that money had come from. And you're out the cash, and you've been tricked thinking that some loved one or friend or relative is in danger when that's not the case. So that's a pretty popular one. It's called grandparent scams, but it could be anybody in your family that's subject to that.
I saw a program within the last month, and they were talking about AI.
Artificial intelligence, yes.
And they were saying that they can mimic that person's voice over the phone.
Yes. So just me in doing this presentation, I stand the danger because now it's going to be on YouTube and someone can can sample my voice and use that in AI. And yes, the AI threats are not overblown. They are real. They are being used to mimic people's voice. One of the things I'd recommend is that you have a code word, that you have a secret code word that you use with your dear loved ones, your relatives, your grandkids, whoever that may be. And that is a code word that you can confirm they are who they are, right? So there are methodologies or tactics that you can use to get away from that, but AI is just growing very quickly. I'm a big AI user. If anybody wants to talk about AI, I'm happy to do so. But AI is very capable and is being used by the bad guys just like the good guys are using it, right? It's just a technology. All of these technologies that I'm talking about, they're used for good and bad. And we want you to keep using it for good, and we want to protect you from the bad users of that technology. Telemarketing and phone scams, boy, that's been around forever, right? Ever since the phone was invented, I got to think Alexander Graham Bell got a scam call, right? I don't know, I'm not sure, but that's going to happen all the time. These days, I don't answer my phone unless I absolutely recognize the number. And even when I do recognize the number, there's a little bit of caution because all of that can be spoofed. The phone number can be easily doctored by the scammer to look like a number you recognize. Maybe a few years ago, I got some calls from myself. Has that ever happened to you? Yeah, that's your curiosity, right? Like, ooh, what am I doing calling myself? You know, right? So that's happened before as well. Okay, non-payment and non-delivery scams. So that includes scams that are you ordered something and never showed up. I recommend you always stay with the most popular sites, Amazon, Walmart, whatever those sites may be, but try to be careful of the fringe sites because that's when you really get scammed. And then advance fee home repair scams. Some of you may have a contractor, you meet with someone, maybe they come out and they say, oh, you need more insulation, but you don't need any more insulation, right? And then they get you to write a down payment or a deposit, right? You got to be super careful. I recommend that you do investigate any contractors or people who are going to do work for you and be careful of any advance fees. And funeral and cemetery scams. So here you are, you've got a loved one who's passed away, and someone walks up to you and says, oh, they owed us $2,000 for this work. Here's the invoice right here. You know, so there are those scammers that will actually take advantage of you in your deepest despair. So again, no sympathy for the scammers. So, okay, I've talked about this along the way, but let's cover some behaviors that I want you to leave here with. First off, ignore. This is your most powerful weapon or defense. Maybe it's a little bit of both. Ignore the spam calls. Ignore the emails. Some of you, it's very difficult for you to do that. You get an email, you want to look at it, you want to read it, it's got your curiosity, right? I'm going to say start tuning yourself to ignore anything that you're not expecting. And just in this one behavior, if you can walk out of here with just this one thing in mind, it's going to give you peace of mind, and it's going to protect your pocketbook. So ignoring things that are of danger. In a world filled with digital noise from spams, emails, texts, and social media, focus only on what's familiar and relevant and simply ignore the rest. You'll have a greater peace in life just by ignoring the noise. Stop. Just don't click on those unsolicited emails, the pop-ups. Don't give your computer control to someone else. Like, there's so many things that you should just stop. Just don't do it, right? If you can't ignore it, don't click it. If you're going to look at it, don't act on it, right? So just stop doing those things that are risky behaviors. Disconnect. If you find that you're you feel in danger, one of the big red flags is urgency. For whatever reason, the communication you're having, whether it be phone, email, text, chat, whatever that may be, you feel an urgency to go do something. They're making you feel that way, and you want to act on it right away. That's when you should disconnect and disengage on that. And with that goes waiting. When I was recovering all of my dad's accounts, so immediately when this fraud happened to my dad with his phone getting stolen, I reached out to all of the financial institutions and I said, freeze everything. Don't do anything until we call you back. I didn't even have the ability to re-authenticate into his accounts at the time because his phone got stolen and we couldn't recover his iCloud account. So we were stuck with a brand new iCloud account, hearing aids that didn't work because they were tied to his iPhone. That was a whole other challenge unto itself. And financial institutions where we needed to make sure that nothing was happening with that. Now look, the financial institutions will do this by default. They'll generally wait for you to confirm that something was legit. I'm sure a lot of you these days are getting confirmations like, did you really charge this? Was this you who did this, right? This is because the amount of losses in the billions, right? They need to do something to protect themselves. And I'm saying protect themselves because there isn't a tremendous amount of laws that are protecting you. It's really the financial institutions that are protecting themselves. So they're going to pause and wait. And this is a tool that will serve you well because scammers want you to act right away. They don't want you to wait. The more you wait, usually the more frustrated and rude they will get with you to act quickly. So resist the pressure to act quickly. Take your time. Time works against the scammers. Verify, right? You get that call from Medicare. Is it really Medicare? You could just say, I'm sorry, click. And then you can find the number for Medicare and you can call them up and you can find out whatever you think that they may be reaching out to you. Most likely it's a scam, but you want to verify. So always be skeptical when you have an inbound request to then reach out and they supply you information on reach out. Always hesitate on that and go to the source, the U.S. government website or whatever that institution may be. You want to consult someone. So who here is a technology expert? And I'm going to put my hand down because I'm not. I know a lot, but I wouldn't call myself an expert, right? I know enough to be dangerous. So do you. And yes, you.
One of the things that I hate is when you pick up the phone and they say, "Can you hear me?" And they're going to record you saying yes.
Oh.
So I've learned to say, "I can hear you."
Yes.
Saying yes.
So, and I'm sorry, your name is?
I'm Laura.
Laura. So Laura just brought up a really good point. And by the way, this plays into the AI situation, is when you answer the call and whatever the first question is a yes or no question, and you think it should be a yes, like, can you hear me, right? That yes can be your approval of something that's going to take place in that call. So you want to be real careful with the word yes, or even no, or just answering questions in general. I would identify the calling party before I would answer any question. Who is this who's calling me? Why are you calling me? Right? Before you're answering any yes or no questions, including, is this Mark Annati? Who's calling? Why would you like to know? So consult someone who is smarter than you. That's all I'm sharing here, is find someone that you trust, that knows about technology, that if you get something in your email or a text or snail mail, as we call it these days, that you're able to bring this to someone and say, is this real? When I started my business, I immediately got something that looked like something from the state asking me to buy some insurance that would cover. It looked very official, and it was just a scam, right? So you're going to get these things all the time. Again, ignore if you can, but if you're going to pay attention, know that you should consult with someone who may know better than you. Don't try and guess at it. Find someone who can be your consultant. Monitor your accounts, everything that you do. So from a financial perspective, if you're doing stuff online, if you've got a bank account online, that kind of a thing, any kind of transaction you make, set it up so that you get monitoring. You get a text alert or an email or some sort of confirmation that you made a transaction. Why is that so important? Because if a false transaction occurs, you will know right away. Plus, you'll just be keeping tabs on your finances. And to do that, a lot of these notifications are not set up by default. So you actually have to drill into the account, find the notification section, and set it up for the specific aspects. If you go to a credit card, by the way, you're going to have probably 10 different types of notifications. And I recommend you just go in there and say anything above $1. Or, sometimes $1 is your low limit. Okay, anything $1 or above, notify me, right? Whether it be a transfer, a withdrawal, a deposit, even deposits, you should make sure that you're being notified on. Credit cards especially. So whenever I make a purchase via credit card, I get a text. So I know that I've made that purchase. And then protect. And there's a lot of things with protecting, and I have more things in my slides to come that I'm probably not going to get to, but I will make these available, and they are available on my website as checklists. So protecting includes using unique usernames and passwords. Has anybody ever seen in their inbox a friend that they have, an email from them that looks odd? And you're like, why are they emailing me this? Like, oh, I'm reaching out to you to see how you're doing today, or whatever, right? And all of a sudden, at least when I see those, I'm like, oh, that poor person, their email got hacked. And now the hacker's in their email, looking at all of their contacts and sending out an email to everybody on their contact list to see who they can fish and hook in. Right? And this happens all the time. And one of the reasons why it happens is because people don't use unique passwords. They use the same password for their bank account, for their Facebook, for their local gym, right? And all of these different services, if one of them gets compromised, now they have your password. And they can try it in all the other accounts that you have registered. So this is why having unique usernames, if possible, but definitely unique passwords are most important. And one of the biggest things that you can do for any account of any importance is use multi-factor authentication. So it's something you have, you are, or you use. And what that does is you enter your username and password, and then it prompts you to enter a code. And you get that code either via text, which is not as secure, but I'm going to start there. You either get it by text or by email, or you have an actual application on your phone that generates the codes. And that's something I do. And what that does is it's a third piece of information so that if a hacker had your account and password, they'd still get prompted for the code. And by the way, if you, on your phone you're using multi-factor authentication where you do need to enter a code, if you are doing that and all of a sudden you see code requests coming in, right? Or you're getting the codes coming in, that's a red flag that maybe somebody's trying to hack your accounts, right? So it's another way of knowing when you should dive in a little deeper. Keep your software updated. Maybe some of you have your the old iPhone that belonged to your grandson, and now they handed that off to you, and it's no longer being updated. And so, right, I know there's a few people here that have that, right? They have the old iPhones like, it's working, I don't need to get another one. Let me tell you something, bad move. Why is it bad? Because older devices, they don't get updated. The companies don't invest the money into them anymore. They don't apply the security software updates. And as that phone ages out and is no longer supported, it's easier and easier to hack. So I do recommend if you're going to make an investment in technology, and your phone's probably one of those most critical investments to do. So spend the money, get an upgraded phone, one that's covered actively by software updates and patches, and just make sure your phone is always updating. And be really careful with all of the apps that you install. I know you want to play the free games and do that stuff. I get that. But you got to make sure all of those apps are updated and only install the stuff that you really, really need. If you try to game or something, like, get rid of it if it's not something you're going to play down the road. So be really careful about all the stuff you install, but just make sure all of that stuff gets updated, and you can set up automatic updates. Yes? How do you get rid of applications on your iPhone and your Android is a little bit of an advanced topic in the sense that I can't really step you through it without showing you. And it also depends on the operating system. So older versions of Android and what's called iOS, or the Apple operating system, have different ways to get to the menu. This is where AI can help you, by the way. I have version iPhone 14 with iOS 17. How do I do this, right? And it'll usually give you the right sequence to do it. Yes, Ed?
If you were to buy a new phone and you want to, and they're going to transfer the information on your old phone onto the new phone, is it possible that you have bad information to begin with?
So Ed asks a question, which is, if you get a new phone, and now these days, especially with iPhones and Android devices, you could just connect the two phones, and it'll transfer all your information over. In general, that's a safe way to go and the most convenient for the consumer. There is a danger there, which is what you're alluding to. Can you get bad stuff from your old phone onto your new phone? You definitely can. It's difficult for me to advise you not to do that, because the alternative is a lot of work and a lot of time, which is reinstalling all those applications. And generally, when you have your iPhone and your Android, it's backing up to the cloud. So in theory, you shouldn't have to connect to two phones, but if you're trying to transfer all of your photos and videos, and by the way, the videos are the big ones that take up all the space. When you get that message that says you're out of space, it's usually the videos. That's something that is best transferred directly. Yes?
Oh, my suggestion is I have a iPhone, and I just spent, I'll scare you when I tell you that I spent 5 hours between Verizon and Apple. But one of the main things is, as you said, you have to make sure that your data and your emails and photos are on the iCloud. If they're on the iCloud, then you can transfer over to your brand new phone. You're
Yeah.
gonna ask you that.
Yeah.
If you don't know what questions to ask, go to your main source of where your phone bill is from and start the questions that way.
So the direction here is really making sure that your phone is backing up to the cloud. What's the cloud? It's just a bunch of computers that are owned by someone else in some big data center somewhere and storing all of your information. And if you just make sure that you're synchronizing to the cloud, then you should be fine getting a new phone. You don't necessarily have to transfer everything from the old phone to the new phone. You could throw that old phone away, and then you connect it to your iCloud account, and then it will download everything. And that will take some time, especially if you have a tremendous amount of storage. So you would need a very fast connection for that. I'm going to cruise along a little bit faster here, only because I have just a few more things on the behaviors. I do have a lot of other things in the slides on the how-tos. You're asking me a lot of how-to questions, and I love this. This is great. But let me cruise through just quickly here a few more items. So making sure you use secured Wi-Fi. That means Wi-Fi that doesn't have a password. Don't even attempt it. Don't use it. Use a Wi-Fi that's got a password at minimum. Limit your online personal info that you give. Maintain updated antivirus, anti-malware software. There's a lot of different and helpful packages out there that can protect you. And enable the pop-up blockers in your browsers. Make sure you're not getting the pop-ups on any site that you go to, because those pop-ups can be very bad and malicious. Never leave devices unattended. Don't leave your phone out, your computer out. If you are, then lock it. Don't leave it open. Some of you have asked me to look at your phones on occasion, and I've actually, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I'm very careful not to handle your phone. Like, I don't want to own whatever I'm touching necessarily, but it's a bad habit to do that anyways. So be very wary of just giving your phone to someone to do something with. Even taking a picture can be dangerous, and things can be compromised that way. And then set up credit freezes. I spoke about that earlier with the big three. I do have the contact information in my slide deck, which I'm happy to get to anybody here. And it's also available on my website in the checklist. I've got all of this information ready to go. Yes? So a freeze versus a fraud alert with your credit. First off, a freeze can be easily done without any supporting documentation. You just need to go to the credit provider. You can either do this by a call, or you can go to the website, of which you'll have to enter a number of corroborating information if you don't already have an account. And then establish your account, and then you can put a freeze on it, and that's what I recommend you do, put a freeze. A fraud alert, needs to be accompanied by a police report. So you have to fill out a bit more information on a fraud alert. A fraud alert, so what's the difference between the two? The freeze is your generic kind of, nobody can open up credit in your name, but other inquiries and things can come in and still look at your credit. I'll just say that to a certain degree. A fraud alert is a higher level of alert, much more restrictive on who can view your credit, what can be done with your credit. So it's a little more extensive, and if you can do a fraud alert on your account, then that's what I would do. And then just monitor your credit report. So there is a government agency that you can get free credit report. I may not have the correct URL in my head, but you can get a copy of your credit report, and I recommend you do that, because then you can examine whether everything looks correct to you. Maybe you've got a new address on there that you're like, where did this address come from? Or what's this credit account that I see here, right? It gives you an opportunity to investigate that information.
Just going to ask a question. We have the sheriff's department come in every once in a while to do a presentation.
Yes.
And one thing that surprised me, the thing is, she said absolutely do not use your debit card. She said solely use your credit cards and pay them off at the end of the month. She says the debit.
There's a great tip, by the way, which is using a credit card versus a debit card. So debit cards invented many years ago so that they could actually draw directly against your checking account. So there's no waiting period, there's no intermediary. Basically, you use a debit card, it pulls right from your checking account. Credit cards offer you a buffer between that purchase and when it's actually paid. And so always use a credit card. Don't use a debit card unless you absolutely have to. And get a credit card. Many banking institutions will provide you a credit card. All you have to do is apply. And by the way, you'll have to unfreeze your credit in order to get that credit card, and then freeze it again when you're done. So we're at the top of the hour. Privacy is another area where you're going to want to minimize the amount of information that you give to anybody. For whatever reason, you're always going to want to be protective of your private information. That could include something as simple as your address, right? So just be very wary of giving personal information to really anybody, especially like if let's say you're at an event and they have a sign-up sheet and they're looking for your contact information. Just be really wary of anywhere where you're providing your information, and it's really not, it requires a bit more legitimacy to confirm.
So if you Google something and then it comes up and it will say this site uses cookies.
The cookies. All right. I'm going to get to the cookies here because I do have a slide on that. I'm going to talk about educating yourself. There's all sorts of newsletters that you can belong to. I have several of these that come in, including AARP's Fraud Watch Network. That's something easy for all of you to apply to, and you'll get alerts on the latest frauds that are happening. And presentations like this, you can never learn too much about this activity, and then report and get help. So just make sure that you're reporting fraudulent activities to this website, ic3.gov. That's the FBI's website. And look, they may not respond to you, but what happens is that information, like I got a call from this number, or I got this piece of paper in the mail, or I got this odd text, that information feeds their database and allows them to zero in on where those attacks are coming from and protect them. So all good to report these to the ic3.gov website. And then lastly, protecting yourself is just limiting your risk. So I'm going to just cruise through that, but I do want to get to the cookies real quick. Let me just pop into that. And again, this presentation will be available to you. Oh, and checks. Most of you still write checks, I'm assuming, right? Okay, just some real things. Can we go over by 5 minutes? Are you okay with that? Okay, great, because there's so many important things I want to share with you. One of the things is just best practices with checks, and maybe this is old school news for you, but it's something that someone reminded me of recently. I did another one of these presentations, and most of the people there didn't have any online accounts. And first off, I was thrilled because their attack surface is very reduced. That's some technical terms for you there. But the fact that they were using checks, all of a sudden I realized, I'm not including information on just checks, protecting your habits with checks. So here's a few tips for you. Use indelible ink. Don't, I mean, it's a bit, you wouldn't use pencil, right? But use a dark indelible ink on there. Sometimes people use the felt tip markers in there, right? So that helps you right there. No blank spaces. That means that if you have a dollar amount, draw a line in the blank space. So don't let that blank space be used against you. Disguise the checks. Now, one of the people was telling me don't use a greeting card because of the colored envelope, yet I find sort of opposite advice on that as well. So it's sort of a mixed bag here. I would say, per my previous conversation, if you're going to get a greeting card, white envelope, go white envelope, if that's an option. If not, it's okay. But wrap your check, make sure it's disguised, put it in a piece of paper, don't make it obvious that the check can somehow be seen through the envelope. By the way, U.S. mail, pretty darn secure, I would say. Not a lot of concerns, but you should make sure that you use tinted envelopes if you are sending checks in the mail, that you avoid marking it check enclosed. Hello, all right. And hand deliver if you can, or use certified mail, right? If it's some big important check, you're going to want to make sure you're tracking that. So just use certified mail for that. Inexpensive to do that. Write restrictive endorsements, like for deposit only, right, on the check. So make sure you're writing what the purpose is of that check on there. And then securely store and limit access to your checkbook. Some of you may have people coming to your house to do contract work or aid work or whatever that may be. Don't make it obvious where all your finance stuff is. It's all right here, Don't allow that to happen. And then regularly monitor and reconcile your accounts via your checkbook, your online account. Just make sure what's in and out is what you're actually tracking in your checkbook. Okay, here's the cookie question that was asked of me just a moment ago. So first off, why do you even get cookies? They help the websites remember you and track you. That's what cookies are. They're like little files of data on you from your last or subsequent visits to the website. In general, they are meant to be helpful in your experience with the website. In practice, a lot of them are abused. And there are also tools that mine your cookies. So you may go to a website and it actually reaches into your browser and grabs cookies from all these other sites that you've been on and can use those against you. So a little dangerous, obviously, maybe a lot dangerous. So what do you do about that? If you're given the option, and not all websites do this, but quite a few of them do, and websites that are originated in like California or other U.S. states may be more mandated to do this than other states. And definitely international sites may not do it at all. So what I'm going to share here is if you have that option to manage preferences, you get that little thing at the bottom that says manage your preference. I'd say don't accept all. Don't do that. Don't do the accept all. Choose to manage preferences and reject all if at all possible. And at minimum, and something I do is I always go in there and I make sure all the marketing and unessential stuff that would normally go into the cookie does not go into the cookie. So you do something called opt out. These days, you need to opt out of things. You're automatically included in our mailing list. You're automatically going to receive this thing. You've already agreed to give us all of your behavior information when you surf our website or use our application, right? These are things that you have to actively opt out of. And there's a lot of information depending on the application. For example, you may use a Microsoft or a Google app, and it may say, we're trying to make the experience better for you. So we're gathering your usage information to better tailor the experience for you. Opt out. Opt out. So I'm usually an opt-out guy, and I recommend that you opt out as well wherever you can, unless it's absolutely essential. And then, I'm going to sort of wrap up here because we're over time, but I have more information in the slide deck. I'm going to cruise through it real quick, which is all about securing your smartphone. I've got the top 10 features to enable and use on your smartphone. Talk about passkeys, which is a new way to log into websites, which is much more secure. It's a passwordless login. I talk about turning off Bluetooth and Wi-Fi when it's not in use. This is a really encouraged practice here because the danger is that leaving Bluetooth and Wi-Fi on, your phone all of a sudden is sniffing everything around it, and it can connect to not so good networks. Especially at airports and coffee shops and public places. Those are the times that you want to turn those features off. Protecting your iCloud or your cloud account. We talked earlier about your phone being backed up to the cloud. So there are definitely 8 ways to protect yourself with your cloud account, protecting your cloud account from getting compromised. Because if that happens, then your phone and other information gets compromised as well. So I've got some steps built in there on that. I talk about your actual phone number and preventing your phone number from being ported to another phone. So if you're using your phone to authenticate in applications, a hacker could take your phone number and put it on another phone, and then your phone won't work, their phone will, and then they can get into all your accounts, use your MFA codes and things like that. So that exists, and I give you 5 ways to protect yourself against that as well. I talk about what you should do if your phone is stolen or lost, of which I've got some options there as to what to follow using Find My Phone. I talk about what if you need to actually move to another phone, the tips to follow on that. And if you get hacked, how do you start fresh? I had a call about this the other day. Someone reached out to me and he said, look, I'm hacked. I want to hire someone to come in and figure out where I'm hacked and what's going on. And after quite a bit of conversation, I was like, you can spend a lot of energy trying to figure out where you're hacked, which is very difficult. But you should probably start fresh. So I provided the advice of getting new devices, securing those new email accounts, even a new phone number with a different carrier, and starting fresh and then migrating things over with these new devices and new accounts. Sometimes that's the best way to go, is just start fresh. So here's my QR code. The website, which you can find, it's Tron Pilot Tech. And on my website, I actually have all of this information. You can download it. It's in a fraud section. I've got PDF files. There's no tracking on that. You can just download it, use it, bring it to your tech person, bring it to your niece, nephew, son, brother, whoever, who's going to help you, and go from there. And so I really appreciate you hanging with me. We went over time, but thank you so much. for everything, and I'll be happy to take some questions afterwards. Thank you.